My manager called me just background support and took credit for my work. So I built a company in silence and came back to erase her job from the org chart. They didn't recognize me, not when I walked through the glass doors, not when I took my seat at the end of that long, polished conference table, not even when I glanced around, eyes calm posture, relaxed watching them scramble through charts and legal printouts, thinking today would be a historic win for the company. They just assumed I was someone's assistant, or maybe a junior partner from legal, a woman who dressed well, spoke little, and stayed out of the way. And that was fine by me. Let them think whatever they wanted. Let them forget. After all, they'd spent years perfecting the art of not seeing me. Now it was second nature, but this time, their blindness would cost them everything. Richard, the interim CEO, stood at the head of the table. He looked older than I remembered. More gray, less charm. A man who once made every room bend to his will, now fumbling through the first 3 minutes of a presentation he clearly didn't write. "We're proud to announce this merger marks a turning point for the company," he said, beaming at the room. "With this deal, we're securing a future beyond the current crisis. All that's left is one final signature." Every head in the room nodded, except mine. He didn't know it yet, but that final signature was mine. And I had no intention of handing it over, easily. You might be wondering, how did we get here? How did I go from invisible girl with a cubicle by the copy machine to the woman with the power to end this entire deal? Simple. I stopped waiting to be noticed, and I started building. But before that, before the money, the strategy, the chessboard, I was just another overworked, underpaid name buried in the operations department. I used to sit at this exact table. Not in a suit, not with authority, just a laptop, a notepad, and a cup of cold coffee I didn't have time to finish. Back then, I wasn't invited to meetings. I was scheduled. "Can you take notes for us, Maggie? Make sure the projection's working, Maggie. Don't speak unless someone asks, Maggie." I was Maggie from Ops. Reliable, quiet, invisible. Lauren, my direct manager, loved me that way. I made her look competent, fixed her mistakes before they reached anyone else, stayed late, smiled through it, covered her back when things got messy. She repaid me by stealing my ideas in meetings and calling me emotionally reactive when I asked for a raise. And Richard. He once said I lacked executive polish, that I didn't command a room, that I should focus on support where my strengths were. What he really meant was, I didn't fit their mold. I wasn't from the right background. I didn't flirt with the right people. I didn't know how to package mediocrity in a $600 suit. So I stayed in the shadows, until the day they blamed me for an accounting error I didn't make. Lauren let me take the fall, said it was just a misunderstanding, but made sure HR had it on record. My bonus disappeared. My responsibilities doubled. That's when I stopped waiting. I didn't quit in flames, no speeches, no slammed doors. I just sent a polite resignation email and vanished. They probably forgot about me by lunchtime, but I remembered everything. 3 years later, I sat in that room like a ghost they couldn't see but desperately needed. Because the merger they were all so eager to finalize, it couldn't go through without one last signature. Mine. And they had no idea. The woman they'd dismissed, ignored, silenced, now owned 51% of the company through a trail of shell corporations and silent partnerships carefully orchestrated over years of quiet work. I didn't come to gloat. I came to make sure they understood one thing: power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it returns in silence. And that's where I'll leave you for now. Because before I sign anything, we need to talk about what happened after I walked out that door. The pain, the hunger, the slow, ruthless climb back up. Let's go back. Let's start with the night I realized I was never meant to fit into their system. Because I was always meant to outgrow it. Back then I thought if I worked hard enough, stayed humble enough, proved myself enough, I'd matter. I thought the system was fair, maybe not perfect, but fair enough. If I just kept my head down, delivered results, didn't ask for too much, someone would eventually notice, but they didn't. And when they did, it was only to use me. I was 26, just over 2 years into the job, when I designed a process automation system that saved the company nearly $800,000 annually in operational costs. I stayed up nights running test cases, rewriting scripts, working through holidays, while Lauren, the woman who called herself my mentor, took credit for the whole thing. She smiled when she presented it in the executive meeting. even used my phrasing. And when I mentioned gently that I hadn't been included in the email thread, she laughed. Maggie, it's not about credit. It's about the team winning. Funny how team only applied when someone else was cashing in on your work. I didn't push back. I thought pushing back would make me look difficult. Ungrateful, not leadership material. So I swallowed it. Again. The final straw came 6 months later. A minor budget discrepancy showed up in our quarterly report, something easily fixable, barely even a real issue. But someone had to be blamed. Lauren pulled me into a conference room with Richard already waiting, arms crossed. We just want to understand what went wrong, he said. All corporate calm like this wasn't a pre-written execution. I knew the numbers, I had the emails. The error wasn't mine. But when I tried to explain, Lauren cut me off. Maybe Maggie just got overwhelmed. She's been handling a lot lately. Richard nodded slowly. It happens. That's why we need strong oversight. I didn't cry, not then. But I remember walking out of that room, HR report in hand, knowing exactly what had happened. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a body, a buffer, a backup plan, a scapegoat, expendable. And once you realize that's all you are to them, something inside you shifts. That night I packed up my desk in silence. No one noticed. No one said goodbye. I left behind a succulent someone had given me on my first day, dead, dried out. Just like whatever hope I had left for that place. I walked home in the rain, not metaphorically, it actually rained. Soaked through my coat, ruined my shoes. The kind of rain that feels personal even if it isn't. And when I got home, I collapsed on the floor of my tiny apartment. No furniture except a desk and an air mattress. A couple of half-read books. A cold box of leftover Chinese takeout. That's when I cried. Not just for what they did, but because I had nothing else left to do. I had no plan, no job, no backup. But I had one thought that kept spinning in my head louder and louder until it drowned everything else out. Never again. Never again would I beg someone to see my value. Never again would I fight for a seat at someone else's table. If they didn't want me at the table, I'd build my own. And this time, they'd have to knock just to be let in. I started with what I knew. Operations, logistics. The unsexy, often overlooked bones of every business. While everyone else chased glamorous startups with AI and buzzwords, I focused on efficiency. On problems companies didn't even know they had yet. I built a platform modest at first that helped small businesses track workflows and resource allocation in real time. It was boring, practical, brilliant, and completely mine. I worked freelance contracts to stay afloat. Ate ramen, shared Wi-Fi with the nail salon downstairs, took online courses at night sharpening my business skills like weapons. I didn't post on LinkedIn, didn't network for clout. I worked, quietly, consistently, and slowly things shifted. Clients grew, revenue trickled in, then poured. One day I got a call from a supply chain director at a regional retail chain. He wanted to license my platform company-wide. That deal alone tripled my income overnight. Then came the investors. Then came the partnerships. And I stayed invisible on purpose. No press, no panels, no photos. I didn't want applause. I wanted leverage. The kind of leverage you only get when no one sees you coming. 2 years after I walked out of that office humiliated, I walked into a private equity firm as the sole owner of a company valued at $28 million. I wore the same shade of navy Lauren once said made me blend into the walls. She wasn't wrong, but blending in had bought me time. Now it was going to buy me power. Because that's when I started buying shares. Not in my name, of course. That would have spoiled the fun. I used a legal trust, multiple holding companies, layers and layers of paperwork, designed to hide the real name behind the money. And slowly, one by one, I began collecting pieces of the company that once called me expendable. They didn't see it coming, because they never saw me at all. They say power is loud, bold, dressed in red. But the most dangerous kind of power is the kind that doesn't need to be seen. While they were refreshing LinkedIn and applauding each other's promotions, I was building something no performance review could touch. My company VeraCore started as a back-end logistics tool. It ended up becoming the invisible engine behind dozens of small and mid-sized brands that wanted to scale but didn't know how. We didn't talk big. We just delivered. Accurate fulfillment, real-time inventory sync, vendor tracking, things no one claps for until they break. I made the platform free for 6 months to early clients. People thought I was being generous. I wasn't. I was building dependency. By the end of year 3, we were indispensable. And just as quietly, I started watching my old company again. Not emotionally, not with bitterness. Like a strategist watching a crumbling castle calculating where to strike and when. They were struggling, badly. The same leadership that dismissed me had driven the company into a slow spiral of poor investments, redundant hires, and half-baked innovation projects that bled money but impressed shareholders on paper. Until the paper caught fire. They laid off 12% of staff that fall. Internal whispers said a merger was being considered, but no one could agree on the terms. That's when I made my move. I didn't just want revenge, I wanted infrastructure. Because for all its flaws, the company still had assets. I wanted legacy contracts, government pipeline access licenses in 4 states I couldn't touch without years of red tape. If I could merge them under my brand, I'd have both reach and efficiency. But I couldn't approach them as Maggie. They'd never agree. So I approached them as VeraCore through a neutral third-party firm. An acquisition proposal was drafted. Clean, strategic. Equal shares, shared tech, shared boardroom. They were thrilled. No one dug too deep into the paperwork. No one questioned who funded the trust-acquiring majority stake on our end. Why would they? The numbers made sense. It was a lifeline. They didn't know I was the one holding the rope and deciding whether to pull them up or let them drown. Over the next 6 months, I acquired 51% of their shares, legally, quietly, and with no press. By the time the final merger contract was ready, every signature was in place, but when the signature of the lead investor on the VeraCore side, who was listed as Margaret Elaine Dunn, a name I legally switched to the year after I left. Not Maggie from Ops, not the girl who took notes. Now I was a ghost in the paperwork, but a ghost with absolute veto power. And they didn't know it yet. Richard, now the interim CEO, after Harold stepped away due to a quiet legal scandal, scheduled the final board vote. It would be held in person in the same sleek conference room where I once delivered coffee and reprinted Excel sheets at midnight. My team asked if I wanted to skip the meeting and just sign remotely. I said no. I wanted to see it. I wanted to look into their eyes one last time before everything flipped. Not for drama, for closure, for control. For the woman I used to be sitting at that table thinking if she smiled a little softer, worked a little harder, they might finally call her valuable. She was gone now. But I owed her this. When I walked in, no one batted an eye. Just a woman in a tailored navy dress with a neutral expression and a legal pad. Not worth noting, not worth remembering. Perfect. Richard opened the meeting with a practiced smile. Before we begin, we'd like to thank the VeraCore executive team for joining us today. I said nothing. Lauren, sitting to his left again, tilted her head slightly, probably trying to figure out why I looked familiar. She didn't ask. Of course she didn't. Why would she? To her, I had never existed outside her needs. She once said I was a good buffer. I was about to show her what buffers become when they stop absorbing hits. The merger vote passed. Every hand raised. Applause. Relief. Richard looked proud. Lauren looked smug. Then he said it. We just need one more thing, the final sign-off from the lead on the VeraCore side. I slid the contract forward. All eyes turned to me. I picked up the pen and paused. Before I sign, I said calm and cool. We need to address a few conditions. Richard blinked. I'm sorry, conditions. I smiled, small professional. You'll find them outlined in the addendum, starting with Clause 3.2, mandatory leadership restructuring post-merger. Lauren shifted. Clause 3.2.1, her resignation effective immediately. Clause 3.2.2, full external audit of all decisions made by Harold during his tenure. Clause 3.2.3, all HR records involving employees dismissed without due process will be reopened, including mine. And who exactly? Lauren said, her voice cracking. Are you to request all this? I looked her dead in the eye. I'm the one signing the deal. Silence. The thick, suffocating kind, the kind that swallows the air and makes even clocks seem afraid to tick. Richard's smile had vanished. Lauren stared at me, pale, blinking too fast. She scanned the contract again, then the signature line, and then my name, Margaret Elaine Dunn. She looked up, really looked for the first time in her life. "Maggie," she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her voice alone, small, disbelieving, full of cracks, was the confirmation I wanted. Richard cleared his throat. There must be some mistake. This clause wasn't in the original, it was, my lawyer said smoothly. Page 23, Appendix C. Highlighted in bold. Sent to your team 2 weeks ago. He handed them the paper trail, emails, timestamps, read receipts. I watched as Richard's fingers tightened around his pen. Clause 3.2 wasn't a suggestion. It was a condition, a non-negotiable one. Lauren would step down effective immediately. Harold's financial decisions would be independently investigated, and the company would issue a formal statement acknowledging wrongful termination practices between 2018 and 2020, specifically in the operations department, specifically involving one employee, me. Lauren's voice cracked. You can't do this. I tilted my head. I already did. But the truth is, this wasn't revenge. This was balance. I didn't need them to suffer. I needed them to understand. And understanding, I've learned, doesn't come through apologies. It comes through consequences. Lauren had built her career on manipulation, on absorbing credit and shifting blame. She was good at it, until she tried it on someone who had already outgrown her reach. Now she sat frozen, trapped by paperwork she never read in a meeting she thought she was leading, facing a woman she didn't even recognize, until it was far too late. I could have ended her career. Instead, I handed her a graceful exit. She didn't deserve it, but I didn't do it for her. I did it for every invisible woman in a corner office without a title, every assistant who did the work while someone else took the credit, every quiet employee who wasn't quiet, they were just ignored. I gave Lauren the choice, and she took it. I resigned, she said, her voice brittle. I nodded once. Smart. Richard was a different beast. He wasn't cruel, just careless. The kind of man who mistook kindness for weakness and silence for stupidity. He didn't hate me. He didn't even think about me. That was worse. Now he was sweating through his shirt. The audit? Is that really necessary? He asked. Yes, I replied. If it goes well, you keep your position. If it doesn't, the board decides. Either way, I'm not here to debate. This will ruin reputations, he said quietly. Only the ones built on sand. He stared at me, then exhaled slowly and nodded. Not understanding, but accepting. And that was enough. There was one more clause. The one no one saw coming. Item 4.1, I said, sliding one last envelope across the table. New operational contract. Exclusive to Viracor. Richard frowned. But we haven't reviewed, you will. After you sign, it replaces our existing logistics provider. No, it replaces your entire internal system. Lauren gasped. That's insane. We've had the same infrastructure for 10 years. Exactly, I replied. The system I once helped design, the one Lauren stole credit for, was now outdated. Clunky, fragile. I had built something better. And I knew every flaw in their current setup because I built that too. They didn't know it yet, but I'd been preparing this transition for over a year. My platform was already tested. Faster, cheaper, more scalable. They could try to say no, but they wouldn't survive the fallout. The contract guaranteed me a 10-year integration deal, full access, full control. I wasn't just walking back into the company. I was becoming the infrastructure itself. Richard didn't speak for a long time. Then slowly he reached for the pen. Before he signed, he looked at me, really looked. You planned this, he said. For years. I met his eyes. Yes. He nodded. One short motion. Then he signed. Just like that, done. The deal was sealed. The company was mine, not just on paper, in every system. Every decision, every dependency. They didn't realize they were no longer in charge. Not really. Because now every move they made went through me. And no one even saw it coming. As the board filed out one by one, silent, stiff, stunned, I remained seated. Lauren didn't look back. Richard lingered for a moment. You didn't have to do it like this. I smiled. Soft, polite, razor sharp. I know. Then I stood, gathered my things, and walked out of the room they once made me feel small in. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. Sometimes power doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. And that's enough to make the whole building shake. By the time I reached the elevator, I could still feel the silence bleeding out of that boardroom, like smoke after a quiet explosion. No one said a word as I passed. No one dared. Not even the receptionist, the same one who used to greet Lauren with a bright, eager, "Good morning," while barely nodding at me, made eye contact. Just a quick glance down, fingers frozen over her keyboard. I didn't need validation. The silence was louder than any applause. The fallout came fast. Lauren's resignation was announced the next day in a one-paragraph internal memo. Effective immediately, it read, "Pursuing other opportunities." What it didn't say was that she'd already been removed from the building, her badge deactivated, her email rerouted, her name wiped from the executive page within 12 hours. Someone on the inside messaged me, a woman who used to split granola bars with me in the break room. Always grateful when I stayed late to help with back-end spreadsheets. She lost it, she wrote. Screamed at HR. Said you were just some assistant who got lucky. I didn't respond. Because luck had nothing to do with it. The board didn't ask for details. They didn't want them. They just wanted to survive. And I was the only reason they still had a company to protect. Richard, on the other hand, was more complicated. The audit began 2 weeks after the deal was signed. I didn't have to push it. Clause 3.2.2 guaranteed it would move forward with or without me. That was the brilliance of the design. I didn't need to intervene. Just let gravity do its work. And it did. Inflated consultant fees. Cozy deals with a friend's firm. Duplicate invoices sent to accidental accounts. Nothing criminal, but enough to raise eyebrows. Enough to strip credibility. The board voted 5-2 to terminate his contract quietly with partial severance. The same man who once told me I wasn't ready for leadership now had to pack up his desk in a cardboard box with a security escort. A poetic image, really. One I didn't need to witness, because I'd already seen it years ago in my mind on the night I walked home in the rain, and promised myself I'd never beg to be seen again. The news leaked slowly, a cryptic blog post from an ex-employee, a LinkedIn update that vanished after 24 hours, then an anonymous tip to a business newsletter, who is the silent force behind the VeraCore merger. Some called me the ghost CEO, others called me ruthless, most didn't know my name, and I liked it that way. I wasn't looking for interviews or speaking gigs. I didn't need a Forbes cover. I wasn't here to be famous. I was here to be untouchable. Then came the emails. Old colleagues, ex-classmates, distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all with the same tone. So proud of you. Always knew you had it in you. Let's catch up sometime. Even my father, who once told me to find a nice man with stability instead of chasing power like some movie character, sent a message. Saw your name in the paper. Looks like you're doing okay. Let me know if you want to talk. I didn't reply. Because I didn't need them. Because the little girl who once needed to be told she was enough no longer existed. She had burned quietly, and in her place someone else stood. Someone who didn't need to be loved, just respected. 3 weeks after the board meeting, I stopped by the building again, not to meet anyone, just to see it. The office looked the same sterile art, same beige carpeting, same tension in the air. But it wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. The new COO, someone I'd personally vetted, walked past me in the hallway. He smiled, warm but not overeager. "Miss Dunn," he said. "It's a privilege to work under you." I nodded, polite. He didn't ask for a selfie, didn't fawn, just offered competence. That was all I ever wanted. Before I left, I took a detour. Down to the 3rd floor, to the break room, to the seat I used to take facing the vending machine beside the microwave that never worked quite right. I sat for a moment, just one. I could almost see her again, the girl I used to be, wrapping up files in a plastic binder, rehearsing how to ask for a raise without sounding pushy, wondering if she'd ever be more than Maggie from Ops. She was still here in a way, not because she belonged here, but because I needed to remember how far I'd climbed. Not for vengeance, not even for pride, but to know that I never have to sit in that chair again. And neither does anyone like me. I didn't take over the company to punish them. Not really. I did it to make sure they couldn't rebuild the same machine that once tried to grind me down and spit me out. Because the truth is, you can fire a bad boss. You can expose a corrupt executive. But if the system stays the same, it just creates another one. So I didn't just change the names on the doors. I rewrote the entire blueprint. The first thing I did was dismantle the old performance structure. You know, the one where promotions were based on proximity to power, not actual performance. Where people who spoke up were labeled difficult, and those who stayed silent were labeled dependable until they burned out or broke down. We scrapped the quarterly review templates, replaced them with anonymous peer scoring and full 360-degree evaluations, ones that actually carried weight. People panicked at first, and then something changed. The quiet ones started rising. The ones who used to be overlooked in meetings were finally being heard, because their teams vouched for them, not because of their titles, not because of their shoes, but because of their impact. I rebuilt HR from the ground up. The old team gone. Not out of anger, just irrelevance. They weren't trained to protect people. They were trained to protect the company from people. So I brought in specialists from outside the industry, people who understood systems thinking, trauma-informed management, real conflict resolution. I wasn't trying to be the cool CEO. I just wanted to make sure no one ever had to cry in a bathroom stall, wondering if their dignity was too expensive to keep. And slowly the culture shifted. Not because I held a town hall, but because fear began to fade. And in its place, something rarer began to grow: trust. Real trust. But not everyone wanted change. Some tested me. Middle managers who thought they could outlast the storm. Old guard executives who thought I was just a temporary face. One even told me in a one-on-one, "I've seen women like you come and go. You burn hot, then fade." I looked him in the eye and said, "I don't burn. I rewire." He was gone by the end of the week. His department now thrives under someone once dismissed as too quiet to lead. Funny how clarity comes when the noise leaves. Outside the company, the industry took notice, not because we were louder, but because we became unavoidable. Our systems ran faster. Client retention tripled. Internal conflict reports dropped over 60% in the first quarter alone. Journalists reached out, tried to write profiles. I declined. They asked for my photo. I said no. Let the work speak. Let them guess. Let Margaret Dunn be both myth and proof. Because when a system is built to erase women like me, the best revenge is making sure it can't erase anyone else ever again. One day I got a call from a name I hadn't heard in years. Sharon. She used to sit 2 desks over. Always wore headphones, always typed fast, barely spoke above a whisper. We shared lunch once when I was new. She brought pasta. I brought silence. Now she was asking for a meeting. I said yes. And when she walked in, she looked different. Not her clothes, not her hair. It was how she carried herself. Straight spine, clear eyes, no apology in her posture. She sat down and said, "I wanted to thank you." I raised an eyebrow. For what? For building the kind of place I thought I'd never find. I didn't say anything, just nodded. Because that was the legacy. Not my name on a wall, not my face in a magazine, but a woman like her, once invisible, now shining in her own right. I didn't keep Lauren's office, didn't want it. I turned it into a shared space. Anyone could use it for strategy sessions, client pitches, or just a quiet place to work. I never needed a corner office to prove I belonged. I'd already proven I could run the entire floor, and now others would too. As the months passed, something unexpected happened. I stopped needing to check if people were watching, stopped needing to enter a room ready to prove something. I'd already done it. But more importantly, I'd outgrown the need. This wasn't about being recognized anymore. It was about building something worth being forgotten inside of. Because if no one remembers me, but they remember how this place made them feel, that's enough. That's power. That's peace. The funny thing is, once you win, people forget how loudly they doubted you. They rewrite history, pretend they always believed. They forget the raised eyebrows. The "Are you sure this is a good idea?" The subtle digs dressed up as concern. And the worst part, you almost start to forget too. Almost. Until they come crawling back smiling like they never turned their backs. My mother sent a card, cream envelope, gold lettering, elegant, polite, cold. "So proud of the woman you've become. Your father and I would love to see you soon." This from the same woman who once told me some girls just aren't meant to lead. And that's okay. It's safer to follow. She meant it kindly. That was always her excuse. But her kindness came with a leash. One that tightened every time I tried to dream beyond the life she'd mapped out for me. I didn't reply. Because I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any speech. And unlike her card, it didn't come with conditions. Then came the call. Blocked number, but I picked up anyway. "Hey," a voice said. "It's been a while." Richard. The man who used to cut me off mid-sentence. The man who signed my audit clause with a trembling hand. "I heard you're expanding into the international market. I might have a few connections you'd find useful." I let the silence stretch, then said, "You had your chance to connect with me 3 years ago. In a room you wouldn't let me speak in." He laughed, awkward, unsure. "Come on, that was business." "No," I said, "that was cowardice." I hung up. Not out of anger, just because there was nothing left to say. I don't argue with ghosts, especially the ones I've already buried. The last one was Lauren. Of course it was. She reached out through a mutual contact. Asked to meet. Just coffee. Closure. Closure. That word always makes me laugh. People who say they want closure usually mean they want a second chance to explain themselves. I agreed. Not for her. For me. We met at a quiet rooftop cafe. Neutral ground. She wore sunglasses, expensive ones like armor. Still dressed like an executive, though her LinkedIn said consultant now. Code for no job. "Maggie," she began, smiling too wide. "You look, well." I didn't return the compliment. She hesitated. "Look, I know things got messy, but I always respected you. I hope you know that." I took a sip of coffee, then set it down. "No, Lauren, you didn't respect me. You used me. You called me reliable because I never pushed back. You took credit for work I built from scratch. And when I needed support, you handed me to HR like I was a problem to be cleaned up." She looked away. "It wasn't personal," she said softly. And there it was. The phrase cowards used to wash their hands clean. I leaned forward. It was personal to me. When I walked home crying. When I ate dollar store noodles for dinner while building the company you tried to destroy before it even existed. When I signed that deal forcing you to resign without ever raising my voice. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to defend. "Closure," I said, "isn't about forgiving you. It's about knowing I don't need your apology to move forward." I stood. "I don't need your respect, Lauren, because I respect myself now. And that's more than you ever gave me." Then I walked away. Lighter, clearer, free. That night I sat on my balcony. High rise, corner unit, quiet. The kind of place that once felt like a dream when I was living in a basement studio. Thin walls, colder floors. I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and reread the email that started it all. "Maggie, you're doing great, but we just don't see leadership potential in you at this time." I smiled. Then hit delete, not out of spite, but because I didn't need the reminder anymore. I had built something real. I had changed lives. I had rewritten every story they told about me without using their ink. People think revenge means destruction, that it's fire screaming doors slammed shut behind you. But real revenge, it's being better, not louder. It's sitting in silence while the world slowly realizes you were never the one who needed fixing. It's waking up in a life they swore you could never have, and not needing them to see it to believe it's real. I didn't win because I screamed. I won because I stopped needing to. Because I stopped asking for a seat at their table and built a damn empire around it. They didn't recognize me at the board meeting, but they knew they needed me, and that was enough.